We have a major problem with how we ramp new account executives. Your new AEs are being declared ramped at 3 or 6 months, but can they actually run discovery or execute the sales process without you jumping in to save them? Most can't, and that's the problem. Most sales teams ramp reps based on time in seat and not capability-based onboarding where you certify your new sellers. So I built a playbook full of frameworks, implementation roadmaps and infrastructure guides that cut ramp time in half and have proven to improve win rates by 75%, and it's completely free. So stop this episode right now and go and download the Sales Readiness Playbook at therevenueenabler.com or use the link in the description below. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Hit Your Numbers podcast, and today we're going to be talking about fixing forecasting without breaking your sales organization. So I will let our lovely guest do a really quick intro in just a second. As a reminder, if you are listening to this, you can go and watch it on YouTube. Not that we're sharing screens or anything, but some people prefer to watch podcasts back and don't really know that we have a YouTube channel, so feel free to go and do that. Yeah, I'll hand over the microphone, really quick introduction, and then we're going to get into some good stuff today. So yeah, over to you.
Hi, James. Thank you for having me. So my name is Victoire De Pontbriand. I'm a senior sales director. I spent 14 years in B2B tech in sales. And so I was based in Paris. Now I'm based in London. I've joined Thomson Reuters first and then Nasdaq. And the last few years, I was working at Notified and I ended up managing their UK team.
Lovely. One of the things I wanted to get into, because I was, in our prep call that we had and when I was looking online, I noticed you've been doing this for quite a while. So I think it'd be good for the listeners who are either on this journey as well or they're just about to get into it. What are some of the challenges that you kept running into when building and managing European teams?
So there is one main challenge I would comment, and it's obviously the topic of the episode today, but I've been a rep, I've been a manager, I've been a regional director, and I would say that at every level, the constant topic was the gap between what the team think is in their pipeline and what's actually there. And I had notified a few years ago. So we following many changes because we went through some acquisition, new ownership, some rebranding or restructure. We had a team in Europe that was very mixed in terms of seniority level. So some very seasoned reps and some more junior who didn't have a way to do things yet. But the forecasting culture was really broken. And the reps, they had no framework. And even the managers, including me, we really didn't have a playbook for how to coach the reps into, helping them get an accurate forecast. And I felt that the numbers that were going to management were actually soft. And what I want to share today is how we fix that, and how my team managed to, hit a materially improved forecast accuracy. So this episode is really about what forecast actually reveals also about you as a salesperson and as a leader.
Yeah, totally. I see this a lot where, the line of work that we do, we go into go-to-market teams and help them fix go-to-market execution. And a lot of the time we get caught up with the strategy piece because that's just not in place. Or, the revenue leader is like, hey, we got a great strategy, but it's not being executed very well. Can you help us do that? And there is usually this massive gap when it comes to knowledge and skill around forecasting and calling an accurate forecast. I don't know about you. I say things like this, and sometimes people are like, no, I worked for an organization that took this stuff really seriously. But when I got into sales, nobody sat me down and said, hey, this is what commit means. This is what best case means. This is what pipeline means or upside. And everyone's got like different categories stuff. And these are the definitions, and this is when it should go into there. So I just was given a quota, a product, and a territory, and I just started selling. And I just started to be invited to a forecast call when people were committing deal. I'll commit that deal, right? Yeah. Doesn't mean anything to me, right?
It's a process. It's not necessarily one playbook that fits every company, every sales organization, every structure. It's a proper process that as a manager, as a leader, you have to go through to find the best way possible to bring your team to that level of accuracy.
Yeah, totally. And I think we just assume that because a rep is tenured, which is, I think, a terrible way of defining if someone's got the right capability or not based on time in seat.
Yeah.
When we onboard them, we just then assume that they know how to forecast. But it's like, if anyone's listening to this right now, maybe just pause the episode and go to Notion or wherever you keep your internal knowledge and try and find the documentation and definitions of commit and best case or upside or most likely or whatever it is that you use. And is it clear when a deal should enroll into that forecast category? And if it's not, probably start doing that. And maybe we'll get into some of that content today. But I just don't see anywhere near enough documentation on this stuff, which is critical, right?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
really
absolutely.
important.
And I think you need to build it also with the team, right? Because it depends on the difference. So what I mentioned about notified, we had very mixed seniority levels. So you can't just suddenly arrive with a pattern or a certain structure that you want them to apply, because it doesn't make sense to just enforce something that is not useful for the team. So you have to work together, I would say, with the team to create that playbook, that specific documentation, and then make sure it's actually useful for the reps.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And like, just before we move into the next topic that I'm really excited to get your input on, but if you're listening to this and you do have a forecast problem, really dead simple way to get an understanding of the size of the problem is just create like a Google form and just have like 3 questions: commit, best case, upside, whatever, pipeline, whatever your forecast categories are, and just give it to like the 10 reps in your team or 20 reps in your team, whatever it is, and ask them to individually fill out what they believe those forecast categories mean and when they should use it, and then pull the data out, and you'll probably see that you're getting a load of different definitions and like reasons or when you should use it. And then you've probably just got like a common language alignment problem. You need to build a one pager on what does it actually mean by category and when should we actually use each of them, so that when your reps jump onto a forecast call and you start running a forecast meeting, everyone talks about commit, best case, pipeline, whatever it is, the same way. They're using it in the same way. Your forecast will just naturally, just out of the gates, just by doing that one simple process, just become a lot more accurate because people will be using it in the right way. I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot more to it than that, but that's just a little tip that anyone listening to, what are we, like 6 minutes in, they might be able to get some leverage there. So again, when we were doing the prep call, you mentioned about finding the balance between being loved and feared. I'd love to go into this a little bit more detail. What do you mean by both of those?
So yeah, I think this comes from actually an experience that I had. It's an anecdote that I want to share. So back then I was managing our continental Europe team at Notified. So the team was mainly remote. They were based in different country, and we flew the team over to London for an offsite. And we went for a dinner one night. And at the end of the dinner, the my boss pulled me aside and he said something that really stuck with me. He said, "You know, I'm surprised because they all seem genuinely happy to see you and spend some time with you." So obviously I was confused at first, and I thought, yeah, obviously they're happy to see each other because also we are a remote team, and why should they not be happy to spend time with me? And then he explained, he told me, listen, you push them harder than anyone else on the forecasting at that specific moment where we were, trying to implement that culture. You're the most demanding on CRM hygiene, and you're the most demanding on deal review structure. But somehow the relationship with the team survived that. And that moment, I believe, changed how I think about leadership. And I realized that now I strongly believe that for every degree of pressure that you apply, you have to apply an equal degree of support. And you can't do that separately. It has to happen at the same time. I think the check-in naturally with a rep after a tough deal review, the question in one-on-ones that have nothing to do with the pipeline, understanding your reps, getting to know them, because not everyone responds to pressure the same way. And you have to understand that some reps they might accelerate under it. And when I say pressure, it also might be the pressure that you get from the top, the pressure that you put to your team to get to a certain level. But in this forecasting context, some reps or people might accelerate under pressure, but other might shut down. And what I discovered here is, as a manager, I think your job is to really identify which is which, and then calibrate the way you explain things, calibrate you manage, calibrate, sorry, how to manage, you manage the reps, and calibrate your expectations as well, because this ultimately requires EQ, emotional intelligence, and not only process. So you might have a great process, but you need to have this understanding of the team to be able to push them without breaking them. And it's also, I would say, a constant adjustment. It's not like you found the right amount and you keep doing the same thing every day. No, it does change over time. So you need to constantly be readjusting when you've been putting pressure. And when I say support, it's not only building the relationship, but it's also supporting them in achieving the task you want them to do. So it's, if you need them to forecast better, so I think one element that I might repeat over the call, it's to coach them relentlessly. Relentless coaching is one of the key to change a culture, implement something new, and forecasting in general. Well, whenever you need to change the culture, it's obvious, but when you just need to improve it, I think it's also a big key.
Yeah, the coaching and the support piece is usually what's missing. People just have the whip. you know, they got the whip part really good. We might
Yeah,
call those like a scoreboard manager. They're sat there refreshing the CRM dashboard every 5 seconds, and then whipping the reps. But they fail to do the support. Every now and then, you need a big pair of arms around you. It's an emotional gig. A lot of us are pretty emotional beasts, right? But yeah, being really firm but fair.
yeah, exactly.
It's a lesson that I learned the hard way. I got too close to a couple of reps on the team, and um, when times got tough, like they didn't really dig in. So I had to really learn from that. And when I changed that, um, and I inspired them. I showed them that I genuinely care. I did some of the role with them so they could see, like, actually it's not that scary to ask the tough questions and things like that, and ripping the cold calls and getting you punched in the face 5 times in a row, that kind of stuff. Like, I always say, like, they followed me into war. We never went into war, right? But when we went into battle with prospects and competitors and things like that, they would follow me and go and do it. And I'm still in touch with a load of those sellers now because I invested heavily into them professionally and personally to understand who they are, what do they want to achieve, got really intimate like with them. But then I was really firm on, like you said there, the standards. We have these operating standards and principles, and it's not a question mark. I'm asking you to do it. You need to align with it.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a point that I really like as well, and I want to highlight is the fact that the support has to be shown as you're doing the work with them. You're not
Mm-hmm.
here like doing reporting or having a look at what they are doing and just reporting it back or judging the work. You are actually working with them. And I think that's key because I believe this part of the job, you need to have a bit of humility. You cannot be successful alone as a sales manager. When you do get some rewards or recognitions or performance, it's not you, it's ultimately the team. So you cannot just be successful by enforcing some rules and expect people to follow you. It is really really a teamwork, so you have to be there. And as you said, this part of the support, I think it's really key, is doing the work with them as well.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. One of the things that I typically find I end up doing when I work with sales organizations now in the line of work we do is when I'm with the management layer to help like reinforce and bed it in. I'll say things like, Bob, when was the last? Let's say they got a pipeline problem. Bob, when was the last time you actually picked up the phone yourself and made a couple hundred dials and built a list and sent some emails and tried to book a meeting? And they're like, oh, they come up with a load of excuses, right? Years and years and years ago. And I'm like, dude, how about you block your calendar for the next 2 days? Yeah, everything else can wait. This is a big problem, isn't it? Like, block your calendar and just go rip the dials and see how hard it is. Because at the moment, you're just like asking your reps to do more because the conversions aren't there. You're
Mm.
not coaching and training your people, and that's why we're here to help you, because you're under resourced, you don't have capacity. But you also have to appreciate it's bloody tough out there. The game is always changing, even though people say it isn't. We've got new competitors coming into the market, like vibe coding, and we are going to see a new wave of different types of threats and competitors in our sales environment. And all you're doing is just whipping people, asking for more and more and more, and you're burning people out. Like, actually go out there and do the job, see where it's tough, and then go and be like, well, where's the playbook to solve this? Oh, we didn't have it. Well, maybe I should start
Mm.
there. And my reps will, one, like, appreciate me because I'm trying to like find the problem myself by doing it, and then I'm trying to solve the problem for them, and people will then do the hard things because they know that you care.
Exactly.
When
But I
you're
think it
asking for
should not
more.
even get to that point.
No.
You should know exactly what is the, the content of the day. Like when you're managing, even if you're not the direct manager of a BDR team or junior A's, you should know how hard it is for them to make calls, how tough the conversations are. So it should not get to the point that you have to do the dives yourself to understand how hard it is. And I think that's again this kind of finding the right balance. Obviously, you will always have to ask your team to do more with less,
Yeah.
but ultimately, if you know exactly how they are going through their day and how tough it is, then you can balance your expectations and what you're asking them to deliver.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. So yeah, if you've got a problem, not just in forecasting, but just in general, just go and try and do the job. Like I'll wrap up on this point. When I was building Staff Circle, this is during the pandemic. We were building, a brand new business. When I joined, there was, I don't know, 7 people and 12 customers. So we really had no proven way. I'd never sold HR tech before, and in fact, all of the business I'd worked at didn't even have a HR department because they were startups, other than BT. But you'd never meet anyone in HR at BT because they were in some office somewhere you couldn't get access to. So I never even knew the buyer persona, so it was tough, right? And I remember this time where I think I had maybe 10, 12 reps, and I was managing new business and a bit of expansion and renewal because we were just doing a bit of a change process. And a couple of meetings in the afternoon just got cancelled, and my team was struggling to book meetings in that period. So I just ripped 140 dials in a couple of hours manually without power dialer in the office in front of everybody. I was like, I get it now. It's really tough. Like there's 120,000 records in HubSpot. Building the list took me ages, let alone getting through the dials, right? So I just then worked the rest of the weekend to fix some of that problem and did it again the following week. I was like, okay, this is a bit better now. And then just built the playbook, trained my people on it, coached them, held them accountable to it, and surprise, surprise, we kept growing the business. So, if you are struggling with something, go do it yourself,
Yeah.
figure out why it's really not working, then fix it, and then teach your reps how to navigate that process more effectively. And again, surprise, surprise, good things happen. It's not a silver bullet, but try that before you start buying some AI tech or firing everybody and starting all over again.
Yeah,
Anyway,
definitely. But that's how it's also coming back to the playbook. You can't build it yourself. You have to build it knowing what the team is going through and potentially build into the team to improve the adoption. And ultimately, again, you can push hard, but keep people with you. But the pressure and the support always have to be equal and they have to arrive at the same time all the time.
yeah, really good point. Love that. We could probably spend the whole episode talking about that, but there's some other things that we probably need to get into. One of the things I really want to get into, because I'm big on Medic,
Yeah.
wrote a book last year called The Champion Playbook, because obviously it's such a key component of Medic, well, of selling in general. And one of the things that we spoke about was you've got the simplified framework that you use. Maybe you could just kind of walk the listeners through what that is, why you did this, and what that looked like.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think just to give a bit of context, back then, so I mentioned all the changes in structure, the fact that teams were coming from different companies with different habits, mixed levels of seniority. So we had, as I mentioned, the reps had no real process. They have zero structure. The managers didn't have proper playbook to, I would say, ask the right questions in the deal reviews. And the problem was actually complexity dressed as a process, and every team had a different version of it. So week after week we were just sitting in meetings and the reps would describe their deal, but nobody really had control over them, and we as manager were not equipped well enough to identify that. So just to summarize a little bit what happened, but basically we looked at Medic and decided it was right, but too much as a starting point. And I think the key idea here is adoption is everything. A brilliant framework nobody adopts is worthless. So the idea here was to take what was already existing and good, but we stripped it back to 3 blocks that was easier for the team to understand and adopt, which we called timeline, dependencies, and next step. So quickly going into the details to show how we put into those three as much as we could from Medic. The timeline or time scale is basically the close date and the justification for it. So the emphasis for us was, this is not when you hope the deal is going to close, it's when the client needs the solution or the service to be in place. That's very, very key. So the justification is as important as the date itself that you chose to put in your CRM. And the natural way, I would say, what we used to say is to choose as soon as possible date, but that's just a wish. The key here is to really identify and put the latest possible date, because that's the one that reveals the constraints, the urgency, and the real leverage that is on the deal. The second block is dependencies. So very simply, what does this deal depend on? What would kill the deal? Why would you lose? Another tendency for reps was to put in those notes like, how would I win? Like, we have better pricing, or we have this feature that they don't have. No, the key here is, why would you lose? Because then when you identify your risks basically, and you can name the dependencies, you can work on them. It also allows you to identify what you're not in control of, because obviously if it's pricing, easy, you can talk to your manager. If it's a feature, not that easy to fix it in short term. And if it's anything else that's completely outside of your control, and on the client side, potentially this deal is a bit uncertain. So the idea here is to name really, what does the deal depend on, what do you control, what do you not. And if you can't name those dependencies, very easily you're just forecasting on hope. And this I'm going to repeat as well, because hope is a big issue in in our sales culture, or was at least. And the third block, so we've spoken about timeline dependencies. The third one is, which is the last filter, is the next step. And I'm very, very strict about that one, because the next step should be extremely simple, a couple of words, and it's always an action. It's always something that you're doing to progress the deal. Never like, I'm waiting for the contract to be signed, or I'm waiting for the client to confirm whatever. You're never waiting. You're either chasing, unblocking, escalating, or you have ideally a scheduled next step agreed with the client, which is a call, a meeting with a very clear objective. You know exactly why you're going to meet the client. You know exactly what the outcome of this meeting or this call should be. And I would say together, those three elements, timeline, dependencies, next step, they should give you a very clear picture of any deal under 60, even 30 seconds. And once you've built this habit with these three blocks, then you can layer in more medical elements on top. But this, again, it requires relentless coaching for people to adopt. And the key here is the framework. The adoption of the framework is everything. You have to start simple and then build on the habit, and then bring the complexity.
So good. So it's not just about putting some fields in the CRM and just asking my reps to check a box. There's a lot more to it, but that's
Yeah.
what most medic deployments look like. It's a, hey everybody, we're going to do medic. There's probably some SKO speaker, be it external or internal, it does 30 minutes. It's all motivational, and then we're like, right, you've now got them in Salesforce. These fields, they're just a tick in the box. Can you just dump it in there? Or worst, they are AI auto updated. I see these tools all the time now where a rep's on a call and AI is automatically updating the fields, which is okay if the reps are then going in there and then like being self-aware and looking at it, and like you said, which they're not. Come on, like, it's just not happening. So that's the risk. But I love that you broke it down. I guess that's mainly around adoption, right? Is because
Yeah.
it's simple, and you're probably rolling out like in the flow of work. So as they're doing it, you're implementing it, so they see how it can integrate into their day to day. Is that
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
right?
And here again, the challenge was the diversity we had as a team. So the team was pretty big. We had about, maybe, if I remember well, 30, 40 sales in Europe almost. And again, the different levels of seniority. So you can't just expect that group to raise their voice every time you're going to roll out something new. You can't make sure that this, you have like all the feedback all the time, like how should we adapt to this country or to this territory. So you need to make it simple so everybody can adopt it, because it's adaptable. And I
Yeah.
think that's the key here. The key here is really the simplicity and the fact that it's so easy to understand. You can't really get it wrong.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. When you was talking about the timelines and timescales, and you talking about close date, um, it tickled me a little bit because if you open up like nearly all CRMs and you look
Yeah.
at like deals closing this quarter, nearly every single one of those deals has a close date of the last day of the quarter.
Yeah, so that's a topic I want to address further. But this is for us. It was one of one element of a list that was absolutely banned, and the one response that is very easy that I had systematically was we close deal and we sign deals, clients sign deals every single day of the year. So why on earth is your pipeline with a
Yeah,
forecast and all your monthly deals at the end of the month? It doesn't work that way. If you do have all your deals stuck at the end of the month, this is just a wish list, it's not a
yeah,
forecast.
yeah, yeah, 1,000,000%. And when you ask those reps, out of curiosity, why is all of your deals on the last day of the quarter? It's
So
deer in
that's
headlights. They can't answer, right? And it's like you just
exactly,
need to go. Well, go find it out.
you're missing the analysis here, because then when you start questioning, you can see right away they didn't have the or they didn't ask the right question, they didn't have the correct element. The levels of justification, the way we would explain it is, so your close date, you identify your close date and you have three levels of justification. The first one is, I hope it's gonna sign at this date, but I'm not sure it's gonna happen. The client wants to sign at this date or around this date. And the third one, which is the best level of justification, is the client absolutely need this. If not, this is the impact, or this is what's going to happen, or this is how it's going to impact financially this team, this company, etc. And you need to then work alongside those. Like, for example, compare with a current provider, like when is the current contract ending. So what happens if the client doesn't have a contract for this solution or this service for a week or 2 weeks or a month? Is it going to be an issue? Do we need a handover or overlap between both contracts? And these questions, they will drive the right behavior for the rep in their client meetings, just by asking them to justify so thoroughly the close date in the CRM. It would drive the right question to actually assess if the deal is on and when it's going to come.
Yeah, love that. Love that. And do you know what? This is really cool because there's so many different people I spoke to got their own different versions or ways of using Medic or MedPick. With my last org in the discovery phase, we would use, I basically kind of just chopped it up a little bit. I called it Meist. It was still Medic, but it was just like certain bits that we did or didn't need. So, like metrics we would uncover in the discovery meeting, because we'd be uncovering pain. So we'd ask like, what metrics suffer as a result of that problem, or how would we measure the success if you were to implement our solutions? We had the M and the I. Champion, like some people will say you can qualify a champion on discovery call. I think it's a load of BS. You need to test them. They need to get you in front of an economic buyer to be officially a champion. But you can identify a potential champion by seeing if they're the pain center, have they been through this before, what do they have to gain, like their vested interests, and then like who ultimately cares about this, like at the C-suite level, or who's the economic buyer, which might not be C-suite if it's an enormous organization. It's not a very big deal. But like whose objective is at risk
Yeah.
if this isn't solved for. And then the bit that really blows my mind is the D component, which is decision criteria on a discovery call. Doesn't need to be like fully mapped out, like in like order of importance and like connected back to business metrics at that stage. But if we're going to go into a demo next, which is in most cases what most SaaS technology
Yeah.
sellers are doing after a discovery call, very few of them actually know how the customer would make a decision.
Yeah.
But then they're going into a demo, and I always say, like when we're training or in like a workshop, imagine you were buying a house and you phone up the estate agent and you booked in an appointment, and instead of like them bringing you in and like asking what are you interested in, they just said, "Come on, in, let's get in the car." Started driving around the neighborhood, and they're like, "Well, let me show you the studio flat." And you're like, "Studio flat?" And then they showed you like the 7 bedroom mansion. You're like, "It's a bit big." And then they showed you like it's 2 bedroom, like flat, and you're like, "Dude, I just want a 5 bedroom house, got double garage with a garden for my kid and the driveway, so when the family come over, they can park and don't have to park on the road." they would just be like, yeah, let me show you that. I've got 2 of those. Right? But
Yeah.
that's the experience that most buyers go through, unfortunately. I don't know. I mean, as a senior sales director, when I was a VP of sales, I've bought a lot of stuff over the years, and the reps are still doing those demos. Show up, throw up, let me show you around the neighborhood.
A little bit, yeah, I agree. I think it was one of the big topic as well. We wanted to make sure that the team was just not repeating the same presentation and going into slides and demo the platform, or whatever thing they could show without actually knowing what the client or the prospect was interested in. And I think when you get to the demo, it's almost too late. What you really need to do better is the discovery call. So the playbook, I think, is one of the most important one, is really the discovery call. This is where the questioning is going to be really key for you to understand where to go next, and not showing stuff for the sake of it, not knowing if there is any interest, from the buyer side.
So we've built the leading skill optimization platform with 400 plus sales lessons, 12 courses from prospecting all the way through to late stage deal negotiation and more, one-to-one sales coaching and AI sales assistance. And I want to give you 7 days free access to the platform. The reason I want to do this is because nobody gets a degree in B2B sales. And after training and coaching hundreds of sales reps and teams in the last 2 years, most haven't mastered critical selling skills, and it's preventing them from being promoted, earning great money, and building a great career in B2B sales. So go to the revenueenabler.com, grab a free trial, and join hundreds of salespeople that are closing their skill gaps and mastering sales. There's a link in the video description. I'm looking forward to getting you set up. Give me a shout with any questions. Yeah, totally. So going back to our kind of conversation around fixing, forecasting, one, we need to be firm but be fair. So be loved and be feared. We need to have some kind of system in place, like a medic or a medpic or something like that. But you don't have to implement all of the 7 or 8 letters or whatever it is you go for. You can, do what you've done, which is put a couple in place and then build upon that, over time. But you do need the playbook.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you're going to have 10 or 30 or 50 reps, which we see
yeah,
all of the time, that are going out doing their own sales process. So forecasting is almost impossible. Coaching is bloody hard because you're coaching lots of different systems and ways of selling. And it's about having that one way as an organization. Yes, sellers have got their own selling style and like personalities and things like that. But so does BMW. And when BMW makes a car, they don't have like 17 different production lines. If they're making a BMW M5, they've got like a big pile of car parts at one end and then a finished car at the other end, and it goes through the same production line.
yeah.
And that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day, is go build your production line and make sure that everyone's aligned to it. They understand it, they have the knowledge, they can execute that, coach them, hold them accountable. I've just talked about it in a slightly different way. Yours is a much better way, but yeah, you mentioned gamification. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so that's one of the thing I believe deeply, is that the way reps talk about their deal in the CRM is a direct reflection of how they think about their deal. We've touched on that very quickly, and ultimately how good they are at selling. So here the idea was the language shouldn't be and isn't separate from the behavior. It is the behavior. So we built a banned word list, and this comes from my previous boss. Was just getting annoyed when we were sitting, week after weeks in those meetings where you could see the reps didn't have control. It was not like an efficient way of going through the deals, and so little by little, we flagged some words that were not the right one to use in this kind of context, in the deal reviews especially. So we built a banned list, so banned words that we could not use, and we turned this into a game. So the idea was, in the weekly deals review, the reps would lose points when they were using bad words. They would gain points when they were providing like a structure update of their deal, and the notes were clearly stated in the CRM, and they had like a good update of their deal in like less than 30 seconds. And the winner, the one with most points, would get some vouchers. So it's simple and it worked. When I say it worked, it's like it worked ultimately to modify the way we were speaking about the deals. And this was inspired by a book that was recommended by my boss at the time, that's called the Sales Acceleration Formula by Mark Roberge. So in that book, he showed that when you actually build a system that reward the right behaviors, the one you're expecting as a leader, the culture then takes care of itself and the performance follows. And in that book, he talks about gamification as a tool to drive the right behavior, especially when you're establishing a new culture like we were doing with the forecasting, because it was definitely changing the culture back then.
Yeah.
And we were making the right behavior the fun one, kind of. And so then competitive people, like most salespeople, would definitely buy in, right? And just start playing. So the list, going through it quickly, the first one was, and I touched on this very quickly, it's I hope. The response here is, in sales we never hope, we expect. And the
Yeah.
hope is also linked to the hope based pipeline, right? When you hold on to your deals, and I want to touch on that later, but hope is what we used to call hopium, and you have to get away from it. It's a drug. So you have to stop hoping and start expecting and build a plan to get where you want to be. The second one was, and I mentioned this, is waiting for the contract. Like in your CRM notes, you should never be writing down that you're waiting for something. You're always doing something to progress the deal. Another one was he said, she said. We asked the team to not quote the buyer, but more interpret them. Like, don't quote or don't just repeat me what they've just said. What do you think it's going to happen? What do you think it means? And that's a lot more powerful, because then it gets the reps starting thinking and go a bit deeper. Another one that is more about accountability is the deal slipped. We asked the team to simply replace that by I misforecasted that deal. The
Perfect.
idea also around the change of language was to take accountability. You have to own it, right? You are allowed to make mistakes, but you need to be able to learn from them. Another one we had is we frequently had in the reviews was, I assume. You should never assume, but always check and always verify. And the worst one, but we've already mentioned that, is to get all your days stuck at the or forecasted for the end of the month. This was double banned. Because that's just, again, it's not a forecast, it's not a professional forecast, it's just a wish list.
Yeah.
And so, after implementing that game, or the gamification of the deal reviews, I would say within maybe months. So it took time, and again, relentless coaching and enforcement from the managers. But I would say we've noticed a drastic change, or a significant change in the deal review conversation. They changed just because the reps, they started asking or thinking differently about their deals, because they were forced to speak differently about them in the reviews. And again, it drove the right behavior in the way that by being asked the right questions in those internal meetings, they were then asking the right questions to their prospect. And I think that's really the key here of coaching ultimately, and coaching on forecasting, but coaching in general, is that you have to teach them, or to help them to change the behavior to make them better and make them achieve better results.
Oh, so good. That's going to make such a good clip. Really, really good. Love that. Do you know what I wrote down? This was when you were saying that, and this was something that was really hard for me to get on board with when I became a VP of sales, is the way that my team perform and operate is a reflection on my leadership. Like if they use things like
It
I
is.
hope, or they stick everything in the thingy, or I'm just chasing this, or I'm waiting for that, or whatever it is, like ultimately they've picked that up from someone, or I've allowed them to
Yeah.
have that behavior. So yeah, as soon as I realized that, ultimately, I think it was after I read Extreme Ownership. I don't know if you've read that book, but that's a good one. But
Yes.
yeah, like it ultimately, if something goes wrong, it's my fault.
Yeah,
Um,
and I
I've
think
got to own
that's
it.
it's the culture of accountability. So it has to apply to you as a leader and also to the team. Everybody has to do their part. But here there is, again, we talked about this collaboration and working with the team, and it goes both ways. And clearly, I think if you have a team that is not able to accurately forecast, it's because you let it happen. And
Yeah,
there is also another aspect of it. So I don't remember which book it was, but I think it was one from. I'm not sure, but there was a concept of the team or your team level would also depend on what you tolerate. And if you do tolerate mediocrity, then you're bringing the team down, and the top performers are not going to continue overperforming. And you are going to change the culture by how much you tolerate in terms of underperformance of or mediocrity. And I think the forecasting is a is an eye opener for this particular aspect of the dynamic of a team. If you do tolerate mediocrity, when you have top sales performers who are doing the hard work, they are doing the boring work, and I think top sales always do it first. But if you do tolerate that the forecast is not extremely accurate or the notes are not great, you are allowing this, and then you're bringing the rest of the team down. So that's why also as a leader, I think not only you need the accountability, but you need this discipline to do this constantly. Forecasting has to become a reflex and not something that you prepare for a call because you have to report yourself to your manager about the forecast for this month. It has to live in your head.
yeah, 100%. I don't know if this is the right way to talk about it, but when you talk about gamification, one of the things that I started doing was if I wanted to change behaviors, I put it into their comp plan. So, like as we were building
Yeah.
Staff Circle, one thing that was really firm that even I couldn't overrule is we couldn't do anything under a 3 year contract. And ideally, we're trying to do like 4 or 5 years if we can. So I would just put accelerators in their compensation plan for 4 and 5. Or I would say you can close a deal, but if it's not 3 years, you don't get paid on it. Surprise, surprise, all of our deals are 3 years. We stopped asking for,
Yeah.
1 year contracts and things like that. So if you want to drive a change in behavior from a salesperson, stick it in their compensation plan and say, even if you do
Exactly.
100% of your number, if you don't align with this, if your forecast is all sloppy, you're only going to get paid 50%. And people will hate it, but they'll come at that meeting and go, well, I can't convince James to change his mind. It's in place. I better just go and do it. Right.
Yeah.
And then as long as the
I
support
think
mechanism's there and you help them with it, then they'll get on board and they'll go run with it. Right.
exactly. Then you have to provide the support. But that's exactly the concept of if you build the system that rewards the right behavior, then you make the behavior change. Here, the gamification was really on the wording because I think it reveals how the reps think about their deal. So here, if you change the language, then you change the culture and you change the number. But it does apply to exactly as you said. I think if you want to drive the right behavior, you have to change the system. And if you change the comp plan, it's the same. You change the
Yeah.
comp plan, so you change the culture and you change the number as well, ultimately.
Yeah, 100%. And then just before we kind of finish up on the last question I want to ask you, you mentioned about slip deals, and this is a topic that I find myself talking to a lot of sales leaders about. Is in most cases that deal actually never really slipped. It shouldn't have been in the forecast in the first place. Yeah, like a rep's
Yeah.
like, yeah, that deal definitely going to happen. I was in an office with a team recently, and a rep was talking about a deal, and I got up on one of these walls that they've got that's like you can draw on, right? It's like a whiteboard wall. And I just drew the sales process up with a line, and at one end I just put like start and end. And I chucked the whiteboard at the lad and I said, where do you think you are in the sales process? And he drew the line at like 80%. I just asked him like really couple of like basic qualifying questions, and we realized he's more like 20% in the sales process. Yeah, and that's just like it's not that dude's problem, right? Like it just comes down to the playbook and documentation and an understanding of how we execute the sales process. And I find myself building not just the stages out, but the steps and more importantly the exit criteria for all of that,
Yes.
and then attaching that to the forecasting methodology and things like that. Otherwise, reps are just like because our sales stages are meeting types, discovery, demo, proposal. Um, let's say I'm selling to you, I do a discovery call and I'm like, cool, my boss wants me to do next step. So we should probably do a demo. We book that in for tomorrow at 10. We do the demo and you're like, okay, I'd really like to see some pricing. So I go, cool, we should do a proposal meeting. That happens next Tuesday.
Yeah.
So I'm now, in
At
theory,
80% of your
I'm like
process.
stage 4,
Yeah.
stage 5, right? But
Yeah.
you're still in discovery phase. You haven't even done a shortlist. You're still like just evaluating where you want to go next,
Yeah.
right? So it's about having really strict exit criteria in the process and then having your forecasting layered over top of that so that when we get to this stage, we know it should be a best case. When we get to this stage, it should be a committed deal because we've achieved
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z on the way through.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it does completely resonate. And at some point at Notified, we actually had to review all the stages that we had in our CRM and to rewrite all the exit stage to make sure that it was very clear for the reps what was the element that you needed to actually proceed to the next stage. But I just want to comment on what you said, like a deal slips, it should actually never have been forecasted. This brings me to something that Jem Blount, I'm sure you know this guy. He wrote the
Yeah.
book Fanatical Prospecting that
Yeah.
most salespeople have read, and when he talks about forecasting, he calls accurate forecasting the holy grail of sales management, and I think it's so right. Again, you don't get there by asking the rep to just report better. You get there by asking the right questions about the deal control. But I think here, one of the reasons that the team never get there, they never reach that point of full accuracy, is because they do carry a lot of dead deals. Or when deals are slipping once or twice, at the end of the day, they're dead. You're just not admitting it.
Yeah.
And a deal that will never close but stay in the pipeline does it because the rep has some kind of emotional investment in the deal, or because it feels like it's a failure to remove it from a pipeline. So it's
Yeah.
like recognizing that you've made a mistake. But this is again, it's hope, and your hope based pipeline will just kill your forecast accuracy every time. And I think that's one of the things you really need to work hard with the team on the when you're a sales leader. And I have one tip that is a very concrete one. It's a question that works every time, almost every time, about those deals that you want to identify, those potential dead deals. And it comes from so one of my reps, Michael, his dad was in sales as well, and we had a pretty big deal in the forecast. It was 120 or 130K, so pretty big for our average deal size. And it did slip once or twice. And his dad asked, he said, if the deal value, or if the deal was worth 10K or 5, would you have removed it already from your pipeline? And he straight away said, yes, I would have killed
Yeah.
that deal. But we hold on to bigger deal. Like the bigger the deal is, the bigger your hope is. So that's how we artificially inflate pipelines, because the size of the number actually inflates your optimism. So you have to learn how to kill the deal early. That's really the I would say the professional things to do. But this question I think is a good tip, and I've reused it many times after that, because it's such an easy way. It's so spot on. It's such an easy way to identify if the deal is actually dead or not. And
Yeah. That's so
the
true.
last point on that is, I think it goes both ways. And I think it's one of the points actually in the book. Even a rep, if tells you that the deal is weak, you have to reward that honesty. And you need to, again, in the culture you're building, you need to penalize in a way the sandbagging as well, because under forecasting and over delivering every month is is bad, right? It's wrong
Yeah.
forecasting anyway. My boss used to say over forecasting is as bad as under forecasting. So if you under forecast and over deliver, and the culture makes you look like a hero, it's an issue.
Yeah.
Your job
Massive.
as a leader is to create a culture where the truth is always the safest thing to say. Because at the end of the day, as a leader, you prefer that someone comes to you, say, my pipeline is at 50% versus target this month on the 3rd of April, and then at least you know what the issue is, so you can work on it. But if they artificially inflate their pipeline and they wait until the 30th or the 31st, then it all blows up, and you have no time left to deal with it. So I think it's again, that teamwork, but you have to reward honesty, and you have to create that culture that encourage people to tell you the truth.
Yeah, totally. And it's not guaranteed, but if you're an AE listening to this and you want to get promoted to sales manager or to a VP, it's really unlikely to happen until you can really call the number.
Yeah.
Unless you're like at a startup where there is no VP of sales and it's the founder who's a techie and they're like, right, I've got to get a manager in here, I'll just promote James. They won't understand like the forecasting accuracy piece at that stage. But if you're in an organization where there is a sales leader and they are trying to promote or bring in a first line manager, and you're an AE and you hit the number occasionally, but your forecast is absolutely horrendous, like you still kind of get there, but it's not the deals that the deals that you actually called at the beginning of the quarter aren't the deals that you
Yeah.
close at the end of the quarter. It just shows that you just don't really understand what's happening in your business as like a mini CEO in that company. So absolutely, and I call it like pipeline bloat. Pipeline just bloats up at the beginning of the quarter. Literally, it's the first today. Everyone's opening up their CRM, and wow, pipeline looks really healthy in
Yeah.
Q2. And then about 4 weeks' time, someone just put a pin in it, and it pops. And
Yeah.
it's so hard for the reps to put a pin in it because I call them like skinny reps. They got nothing around them because their pipeline generation isn't always on. So they like do PG like every now and then, book a few meetings and then stop doing it. Everything bloats out. They feel really good. Great brand. Coca-Cola in the pipeline. $1 million, whatever. Deal's dead. Wasn't even a deal to start off with, right? But they can't
Yeah.
let go of it because as soon as it goes, they look skinny. And skinny people, consistently skinny people in sales end up losing their jobs, right? So they hold on to it. And really, like as you and I as sales leaders, we just want reps to let go of stuff. I want to promote that kind of culture, like safe space, get rid of dead deals, and then come to me with a problem. Let's work together on fixing it.
Exactly.
But
Exactly. Like
the more you
raise
hold
the
on to it,
issue. Yeah. Exactly.
raise it. Yeah, 100%. So terrible way of explaining it. Skinny fat people, but it's easy to understand. It's late in the
The
day.
analogy is actually pretty easy to understand. Yeah.
Good. Last question, which I always try to do and sometimes I forget, but I've remembered this time. So we've got a frontline sales manager listening to this episode,
Mhm.
and we want to leave them with something that they can implement immediately, today, tomorrow morning, whatever it might be. Like what would that be for you?
I think my advice would be on forecasting again to get on top of your deals, like get on top of your own deals, which means your team's deals, before anyone asks you about them. Because I remember when we were implementing this new forecasting culture, almost systematically, when my boss asked me about my team's pipeline, I had to check the CRM. So I was the one asking my reps to know their deal by heart, to update the CRM daily, and still I had to check myself. So obviously it depends on if you have if you're running a business with very high volumes of deals, it might be complicated to know all the deals by heart. But the idea here, or what I mean, is you need to know exactly what your forecast versus target is for every month. What are the deals that are going to move the needle for your forecast, whether it's the second or the 30th. And and again, I think I've mentioned it, but I believe forecasting must be a reflex. It should not be something that you prepare for a review or something that you check because you've been asked to. You have to own it. Don't prepare. You really have to. It has to live in your head. And also it is only possible because the CRM is always fresh. But I think this here the message is you also have to lead by example. You can't ask the team to be on top of things daily if you are not yourself knowing where you're going as a team. So that would be the advice. And I think how you can implement it, a simple habit would be like every morning before you do anything else. And I remember this feeling like I was annoyed every time I had to check and to report back, until the moment I actually, accept it. And it's not only accept, but you just go with the flow. It has to be this discipline of daily check to understand what's happening. So my recommendation is really every morning before you do anything else, you open your team's pipeline, and not to add pressure or to interrogate, but just to see, to ask yourself really, who might need my help today? What can I do to help the team on any deal? What who has a deal with the dependencies that I can actually unblock? Who is chasing something that I could escalate to accelerate the process? So I think those questions are really key. You have to use the forecast as a tool to add value to your reps and not to catch them out. And I think that's the key in the change of the culture is when reps, they do understand that the forecast exists to flag and remove blockers for you. and not to grade them, the adoptions would follow naturally. And the forecast ultimately can become a tool for them to assess their deal better and and they will want to keep it clean because it does help. And I think coming back on the culture of truth, there is one last book that I want to mention on this forecasting thing. Is It's from Patrick Lencioni, and it's called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And so I don't know if you read that one, but I think it's pretty good for
No.
a sales manager. So he has done a lot of books about sales, and this is more about teams in general. But I think it does apply to sales teams really well. It's The idea is, so there are pillars that you have to reach, and the second dysfunction is the fear of conflict. So, in a forecasting context, this shows up at what he calls the artificial harmony. It means the teams look fine. No one argues about pipeline, about the processes, about the numbers. They are potentially submitted on time, but nobody is really in control and nobody is telling you the truth about their deal. So, it's exactly what you mentioned. Like you pop the pipeline at the end of the month and it all explodes. But here it's if the culture, in that culture, they've learned that the bad news get punished, they will maintain this artificial harmony and they will inflate the pipeline because the culture, sorry, doesn't reward the right thing. They reward optimists rather than the truth. So again, it's really backed by different books, but I would say the fix here is to build a foundation of trust. And that means if someone is saying the deal is weaker than I thought, it's a sign of commercial intelligence and you have to reward it. It's not a failure. And your response, I would say, as a manager is, what do you need from me? Rather than how did you let that happen? And when you build that trust, I think then you're more able to get like proper, like accurate or honest forecast, at least, that you can actually work with as a leader. So basically, the idea is just, the reps have control of their deals, you have an accurate forecast. If you do, then it means you're asking the right question and you're building the right, culture for your team. But there is no shortcut. For me, the ultimate idea, and that summarizes pretty much everything we've talked about today, is that forecasting for me is a direct reflection of how good you are at selling.
Yeah, million percent. I should have just asked you that question about 54 minutes ago, and we could have just ended it after a few minutes because that was absolutely spot on. What I took from there is, like I talk about this a lot, you got to be a bit of like a dog with a bone and be obsessed.
Yes.
I'm pretty upset. I've got a very addictive personality, which got me into a little bit of trouble when I was younger with gambling and things like that. But luckily, I've overcome that. But like with work now, it's another thing that I'm trying to master. Is I'm obsessed with working. I'm obsessed with being elite, getting great, becoming an expert in whatever it is that I'm doing. And you can't just read a PDF or listen to a YouTube video for 20 minutes and become an expert and then expect your team to as well. So my advice on top of that would be is think about it like a program. Yeah, that's what we do, is we run like 6-12 month program with teams because we know behavior change and like getting rid of bad habits and bringing in the right ones isn't going to happen in a 2-day offsite. So it has to be a proper program and has to be taken seriously. Otherwise, reps will just assume that James is going to move on in a couple of days and we can go back to doing it the easy way. If you keep,
Exactly.
banging the drum, they'll be like, "We just get on board because he's not letting go of this thing."
Yeah, I think it comes back to the relentless coaching. And I think what you have to teach your team when you're trying to change the habits or the culture is the discipline. The discipline is the key in bringing new habits like live. It has to happen every single day until you accept it and you actually doing it again as a reflex, as we talked about forecasting. But the discipline here, along teaching the discipline along with coaching how to forecast, is the one element that you need to make it successful.
100%. This has been so much fun, and I'm just mindful of your time. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing this. Looking forward to pushing this out to the community and to our customers. And yeah, I'd actually love to do another session and just focus on being loved and feared, because I think there's probably a whole episode
Yeah,
in that
definitely.
in that alone. I think it's so important. So yeah, thank you so much for
Thank you,
coming on the
James.
podcast. Where can people find you? Like, where's the best place for people to
On
follow you?
LinkedIn.
And LinkedIn? Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. All right. We'll put your LinkedIn in the show notes. Cool. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging around to the end. We will see you on another episode of the Hit Your Numbers podcast soon. All right, thanks for listening to this episode. I've got something else I want to give you before we wrap up here. So we've built the leading skill optimization platform with 400 plus sales lessons, 12 courses from prospecting all the way through to late stage deal negotiation and more, one-to-one sales coaching and AI sales assistance. And I want to give you 7 days free access to the platform. The reason I want to do this is because nobody gets a degree in B2B sales. And after training and coaching hundreds of sales reps and teams in the last 2 years, most haven't mastered critical selling skills. And it's preventing them from being promoted, earning great money, and building a great career in B2B sales. So go to the revenueenabler.com, grab a free trial, and join hundreds of salespeople that are closing their skill gaps and mastering sales. There's a link in the video description. I'm looking forward to getting you set up. Give me a shout with any questions.